Hello everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about auto-saving in games and save points in games, because I've noticed there's a lot of people these days who really despise save points and say we used to have to rely on save points in the past and we can now just have auto-saving, so we should always do that. And I mean, that's another rant for another day about saying that, oh, we used to have to rely on this thing, therefore this thing is inherently bad, because that's just false. Something isn't necessarily inherently bad just because we had to use it or we had no other choice to back in the day. But, you know, like I said, that's another rant for another day. But the whole thing about save points is people seem to think that we should not ever have manual saving, or we should not ever have having to save at certain points and not being able to save at other points. I don't think people mean this completely. I don't think people literally want every game to have save states, because we all know how abusive they can be. If you were to play a fighting game and you could just knock down your opponent and then pause and then save and constantly load the state, I don't think people are asking for that in particular. Of course, if we were to say save anywhere in the complete literal sense, then we would have to also include saving during combat and saving in between all the hits, just to make sure that something was to go one way or the other. And that would be mostly ridiculous. Of course, that would be manual saving as well. Auto-saving is where the game automatically saves at certain intervals. Is this a good thing? Completely depends on the type of game. In the games that it's used, most of the time, yes, it's perfectly fine. So if you were to play a game like a fighting game or a party game, then saving in between, in particular rounds or in particular fights or whatever, kind of makes sense. And the reason I say that is, for one, that in a fighting game, when you think of the cycle of what it means to play through a game of fighting game, the fight itself, the single one-on-one battle between the two characters, the player and the other player, or the player and the computer, that itself is its own challenge. So what people are asking for in that case is for the game to save records in between each individual challenge, and that makes perfect sense. Of course, it would be possible for a fighting game to be such a way that a challenge is more than just the fight itself. I mean, of course, you could look to examples like survival modes and time attack modes, which are a series of fights, but I don't necessarily mean just that. It could be possible in a way for a fighting game to implement some sort of limited saving mechanic where you have to spend resources to save, but in order to gain these resources you have to win battles, and the more battles that you win, the more of this resource you get. So it kind of adds that risk-reward thing. I'm not saying that's necessarily a good thing or that people would like that, but I'm just saying that it's a feasible game mechanic that isn't inherently flawed by its design. Because any system can be flawed, but it's not inherently flawed by its own design. And if someone could pull it off and make it work well, then all the more power to them. But I think a lot of the time people don't take into consideration the idea of long-term risk, and I think that long-term risk, for me at least, is very, very appealing. And long-term risk can work in auto-saving games as well, but it works differently in that save points and also the auto-saving ones they work differently. I got a bit mixed up with my words there. Basically, they work differently. And you can't say that one system works and one system doesn't work if you want to imply a game with long-term risk. So there's not only the long-term risk thing I find, because there's a problem I have with saving anywhere, should I say, in that, and this might just be me, I don't know if it's anyone else, but this might just be me, I find myself forgetting to save if I can save anywhere, because there's no queue, there's nothing saying this is a save point, you can save here, you should save here. So maybe that's just me, or maybe there's other people that do that, but the point is that I'm somebody that does it, so I guess it's a bit of a problem, at least a bit in a way. And also with auto-saving, if a game auto-saves, then I kind of have the issue of worrying that something hasn't saved, or not being entirely sure of when it last did save. Of course, there are many games now which have auto-saving that obviously makes sense, and auto-saving is very common these days, and in most cases it does make sense. I'm not arguing against auto-saving at all here, but I think if you're going to have an auto-saving system, and I think Rayman Origins, it auto-saves, makes sense. There's no reason why you would choose to not save in that game. And there is an icon that spins around to say, right, okay, we're saving here, so it works perfectly fine. And I don't necessarily think that auto-saving only ever works in games where there's no reason why you would choose not to save, because of course if there's a game where you're never given a reason to not save, I mean Rayman Origins for example, when you complete a level you can't be worse off. There's no life count, and everything else that counts only ever goes up, it never goes down, so you'd never have a reason to not save, so it kind of makes sense. Auto-saving, it just saves you time and that's it. But you could have other games where auto-saving could work as it could kind of work against you, so where there's a challenge where if you fail the challenge you lose stuff, or you miss out on this really big opportunity and you get sent back, or there's just bad things happening in general, and then it auto-saves. Well, if a game in that case has auto-saving, then the auto-saving feature is kind of telling you, you have to be careful. But the reason I think that auto-saving doesn't necessarily work, or not that it doesn't necessarily work, but just the fact that it isn't necessarily needed, is that if you look at some games that imply this element of risk, and some of my favourite games do this. One example being Azure Dreams, where in order to save the game you have to exit the tower, and if you die in the tower you lose all your items that you have held with you at the time. And so there's that risk of ooh, should I exit now or should I keep going? Because you know that you'd have to either reload that save and get your items back, or continue on without your items, or with your slightly leveled up familiars maybe. I'm not going to go into complete detail about how the game works, but that's one example. Another example is Soul Nomad and the World Eaters. And I love Soul Nomad and the World Eaters. And what that does is it has a mechanic called room inspections. And the way that works is that you do a series of random rooms, random levels, so to speak, random stages, and every one that you do provides you with a reward depending on how hard it is or how far through the inspection that you are, and you can reset the inspection back to the beginning at any time. But you also get a percentage bonus depending on how many you've done in a row without exiting. And if you don't exit, you don't save. So there's that, I've put the work into this. Do I try to go a bit further and get this extra stuff? Or do I go back and, just end it here and be perfectly fine and perfectly safe? Another example of this is Dragon Quest VIII, Journey of the Cursed King. And this particular example, well, while it does something slightly different in that, yes, you can only save in towns, at churches in the towns, but it also does in a way that you have to go out into the field. And I think the beginning of Dragon Quest VIII is a brilliant example of this, because in order to really have a chance against the first boss, the cave, which is the first dungeon in the game, you should level up at least a bit. And if you level up a bit but not enough, you will have a hard time. And if you level up a lot, then you will have a moderately easy time or a relatively fine time. But the point is that if you rush in there, you'll probably get killed, and then you'll be sent back and lose half your money, which isn't good. But you can like grind in the field before that, and I know grinding sounds bad, and again this is another topic, but the idea is that you can effectively go around searching for enemies and grind. And it's not just like a simple small area, it's a pretty big area, and there's like hidden secrets like hidden around to give you extra rewards. And do you take that risk of going further out? Because if you do, and you start running low on health and MP, and you're running low on items, you need to be really careful. So you need to know when to turn back. And I think that having save points in a game, I think the biggest strength of having save points in a game is this very reason. Is for this reason of risk, which, like I said, auto-saving can do, but auto-saving can't do it in a particular way that save points, that they can't do it one way that save points can do it. And that is a really big value of save points. And there's also the reason I said before about it being the visual cue for you to save at appropriate times. I also should mention the quick save feature, which I think is, in most cases, is perfectly fine. The quick save feature basically is where you can save at any point, but then as soon as you load up that save, that file gets deleted. Now that kind of makes sense in that you're not kind of preventing the risk that the game would otherwise provide to you. It's not like you can do something and then just keep reloading it until it goes the way that you want to. The quick save is basically just a way of saying, right, I want to stop playing for now, but I'll come back to it later and continue where I am, without taking abuse of being able to save anywhere. So that's basically what I think, and some people really, really are against save points, despite the benefits that they have. And, I think that when it comes to game mechanics, any idea that you can come up with has potential for being good. Even if it's very hard for it to be good, even if it takes a lot of work to really work at it and make it something that's enjoyable, we shouldn't stop exploring and even thinking about the old ways of games and how games used to focus on things back in the day, because just because we've advanced technology and we can do different things doesn't mean we should abandon the old. We should expand our range of available tools, not move from one set to another. And if we expand our range, we can be more creative. So, I hope that last bit was a bit motivational. Sounded a bit like I was giving a motivational speech there. But I think it's true. And thank you for listening, and I will see you all next time.